Hello, Sonia. Hello, everyone. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We're recording the gardening guidebook. Can everybody see this screen? Sonia,
Hey,
hi.
I just
Oh
got to
my
adjust
gosh.
here. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Thanks.
Welcome. Sonia, what is your experience level on gardening?
Well, I have pretty good experience with roses. Now I'm redesigning the whole yard now that we own the house. So we're going to be going into some new shrubbery and things like that.
Cool. I was thinking this morning, my big gardening, I dove into gardening during the pandemic. So technically that was spring of 2020.
Right.
We're in 22. I'm embarking on my third year of doing all this. And I was listening to a gardening podcast the other day, and I can't remember which one, but I could find it. She did the intro by saying whether you're a veteran gardener and you're seasoned and you've done this for years, or you're just, and you're still learning, or you're just getting started. That's where we are. It's kind of like, so I was just thinking that you might have more years of experience gardening than I have, Sonia, but there's like a learning to all of it, like it's just something different happens it's just a very dynamic seasonal process. And I feel like even the most expert gardeners I listen to or watch videos online, I feel like they are constantly learning. And so the point of creating the gardening guidebook was I believe in teaching to learn. And I wanted to create a system that would allow people to figure out how to garden, because the way everybody does it is different. There are so many factors. It depends on where you live, what zone you're in, what your soil conditions are like, what the sun and water conditions of the space that you're going to use are. And as I was getting into gardening a couple years ago, there was just so much information, and it was so varied that I was like, where is a product where I can just plug all these pieces of information in one place to keep all the different advice, and then I can pick and choose the methods that are going to work for me in my garden. And so that's where this product was born. And I pulled it up on screen share today, which is a little bit different than how I've done these workshops in the past. But so we're just going to kind of walk through the pages. I have my binder, my gardening binder here to show.
Got my printout here.
Guys. Yay. Okay, so wait, this worked a second ago. How do I move it? There we go. Okay, so that's a little bit of my garden story, which I just talked about. And and so the first thing, and we're recording this, so anybody that's watching it, we're just going to start with the basics. So figuring out zone, very easy to do that in the PDF. There's a link. You guys can click the link. It'll take you to plant hardiness. Actually, my screen probably stopped sharing when I clicked on that link, didn't it?
Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Let me share. New share. Okay. So it's very easy to figure out where you are. Sonia, where are you?
Houston.
What zone would you be? Houston.
Yeah.
So you're going to be down there in that that mustard color area. So you're
Nine, yeah.
9A. Okay. So that's step one. So easy. Check that box. We've done it. Back to, now I have to go back to,
Yeah, you're more in the nice green zone where you can actually grow lilacs, and I can't.
yeah, it is a nice little middle place to be, for sure.
And it just rained here really, really, really hard. Which
In
was
Houston?
unexpected. It did. It was really weird.
It also rained in LA recently.
Yeah, I think it was
Last
the day
week,
before
yesterday?
yesterday. It just poured Monday. It poured all day. But yeah, this is like, where did that come from? It's very windy here still. But at least my backyard won't catch a fire. So we're under
This is
fire
true.
warning.
Oh, you are.
Yeah, because it's
Okay,
been
guys,
so dry and
here we
so
go.
windy. That's why I haven't planted anything new yet.
Yeah, I haven't planted anything yet this year. I think another thing I can touch on really quickly for those watching the recording is you can do patio gardening, which is container gardening. You can do raised bed gardening, which is what a lot of people do when they're planting edible food, things like that. You can do in-ground gardening or traditional gardening. And then also I'm definitely, I've yet to master this last fourth type of gardening, which is the countertop gardening. I have a little, one of those little grow pod things
Yeah.
with lights, and it's in the garage. Whenever we moved over here, I didn't start any other plants, but I really would like to master countertop gardening and figure out how to grow herbs in my kitchen year round. It feels like cheating to use the little grow thing, and I guess it's not. I should just embrace that. Traditional gardening is the least expensive way to get started because while you may have to amend your soil, we're going to talk about soil here in a second, you don't have to buy it. Then, so traditional gardening is in lands, that's kind of landscaping. So that I focus a lot on that. I will do raised beds, but to do raised beds and just edible gardening, like plants that you could eat, like peppers and tomatoes and squash or okra, all those things like that. To do that, a lot of times that requires starting seeds, and I have not had a lot of luck doing seed starting in the over the past 2 years. The conditions have to be just right. I feel like you're kind of working against nature instead of with nature. And I feel like even if I get little sprouts, I end up in that month where I need to they call it hardening off, and you take your little sprouts outside and during the day, and then you bring them back inside at night. I'm like, that is a lot of babysitting.
Yeah, I
So
would rather just buy something that's already matured a little bit and plug it in because I don't have that kind of time, and I don't have a safe place where my cats won't like trim it for me. So I have no indoor plants now because they like to get into them. It's like, okay, fine. I'll put them all outside.
You have to haircut the plants when you have animals that eat them.
Yes.
So whenever I am going to do raised beds, and you guys will see me share that on Instagram, even though I just am definitely learning as I go. But the way I like to do raised beds is go and buy the plants at the local wherever. Usually I'm at Lowe's or Home Depot and they have them all out and I just grab.
Right, me too.
Yeah, it seems easiest. So I'm not die hard enough to start seeds. And then on container gardening, that's also expensive because you're buying dirt and you're buying the containers, and containers are expensive.
Yes,
and
they've
then
gotten ridiculously expensive within the last like 8 years. They're like 3
yeah,
times the price they used to be.
And I kind of feel like with container gardening, I am also working against nature a little bit, because like I have a few containers that we have taken those little water hoses up and they
Yeah, a
automatically
little
get
drip
watered.
irrigation. That's what I'm
Yeah.
going to do this year. I'm going to
Yeah.
add that to the pots.
I think that that makes container gardening a lot simpler. I really think it simplifies the process. And I didn't do it. We had a sprinkler guy who figured out how to tie it into the sprinkler. So I don't even know that much about it, but I would like to grow a few containers, especially around the pool. But I just know myself, and I know I'm not going to go out there and hand water those every single day all summer long. So I do feel like that little drip system is probably, if you're watching this recording, you guys, and you're thinking about doing container gardening, think about the ongoing watering maintenance on that.
For those of you that do not have a sprinkler system, there are now new timers that you can attach to your spigots outside. You can add like a manifold to add additional hoses. And there's apps that run these things. So things have gotten a lot easier. You just need to look at it and see how much money you want to throw into the actual first investment. And after summer, if you live in a freeze zone, you've got to pull it off and bring it inside, because they will bust if they freeze.
Oh yeah, if you live where there's a freeze. Yeah. But so I'll piggyback off of that and say that I think one of the most frustrating parts, you mentioned how expensive some of the stuff is. And I think that that's one of the things that held me back from gardening, from like attempting to garden, was just, you end up spending money on dirt and then plants, and then the plants die because you haven't taken all these factors into account. And so I feel like if anybody's just starting off with a garden, I hope that this workbook will help them, figure out what the easiest steps to a thriving garden are without spending too much money. I mean, it's just
right. I wouldn't invest $80 in a planter at this point. If you're
right,
get something inexpensive, a terracotta pot, and play with that first. And then if you're successful, then eventually buy something when it's off season.
Yeah. Yes, it's there's definitely a lot of experimenting that comes into place. Okay, so I'm going to keep walking people through.
Okay.
We talked about zone. We need to talk about growing season really quickly. And I think, do I have a spot in here about growing season? I don't think I do. The growing season. No. No, that's not it. Hang on. We've already done that. You need to find it. In addition to knowing your zone, you need to identify what your growing season is. And I thought we had a worksheet in here for that, but I don't think we do. Oh no, down here it's sorry, it's covered up. No, that says seasonal tasks. That's not growing season. Okay. So the way to figure out your growing season, I'm just going to Google this because this is what I do every time. I'm going to screen share.
Mine has actually, Houston's has changed really weird this season because we've had so many weird little cold snaps after when it should have been warm. And so we've got trees that aren't budding out in the correct time. They're all messed up. So it's gonna be on a sliding scale depending on how your winter was, or if we were actually out of winter yet. Some people aren't.
Yeah, it's different for every place. And I can show you what I did. This is what I've done for my 2022 garden. Is I took an extra weekly planner, and there's a website where you can go enter, I think it's an almanac.
It probably is.
Growing season dates almanac.
There's your seeds. Yeah.
Enter your location. No thanks, advertising. Okay, here you go. It's almanac.com
There you go.
/gardening /planting -calendar. Okay, how do I? No thanks, sweet almanac people. Okay, so tons of handy information here, but what I did was I figured out, it says on average, your last spring frost occurs on April 8th. And so what I did in the front of my planner is I wrote, I think I wrote this wrong. I wrote first frost, but what I meant to write was last frost. Last frost, April 8th. So first frost would be October 29th, and then my zone. So I just I got a weekly planner and I wrote those dates in the front of my planner.
Okay.
I just wrote them the wrong way. And then what I did was I went through, and this helps for people who are doing the seed starting thing. But I went to April. Oh yeah, I just did it completely. I wrote first frost. That is supposed to say last frost. And then I started, no, you have to start backwards. It's been a couple weeks since I did this. So this would be my first frost, October 29th. And then I started going backwards and wrote the last week hang on, I'll show you. So this is the week of October 17th, 2022. Okay. And I put a 1 right there. So this is my last growing week. And then I just went backwards from there. And on every week, I put a number so I can see what week I am in terms of growing season. Okay. And I did that throughout the entire planner. And so now, and I have not gotten started, we moved some rose bushes yesterday. That is the only gardening thing I have done so far this year.
Now, so why did you move them? Were they just not thriving in the spot you had them, or did you have to move them for construction?
That is a very interesting question. When we moved in, and this is going to tie into talking about soil here in a second, but our driveway was gravel, 50-year-old gravel. And so I wanted to change the shape. We used to jokingly call it a parking lot because it was so big, and I wanted to soften it. I wanted there to be some curves kind of around the house. Yeah. And so when we took the hard edges off the driveway, we didn't dig down deep enough to get all of that 50 years worth of
packed gravel and
just packed. And so some of the roses that we planted didn't have enough, the roots couldn't grow. The roots were getting compacted. And then I also sort of changed my landscaping strategy. I decided to do boxwood hedges all the way around the edge of the driveway. Okay. I was originally thinking like, oh, let's do clouds of white roses, but it wasn't working. So I put all of the rose bushes in one spot in our backyard, and I'm hoping, and I really do feel like I've done pretty well with roses. It's traditional gardening. They're not in raised beds. They're in the ground. We've amended the soil. We've added I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but the mycorrhizal fungi. Yeah. Do you do that? Do you use that, Sonia?
Well, what I do is, since our house is actually built in an old rice field, the entire sub layer of dirt is packed clay, and it's very, very hard, and that means it doesn't drain. So when we moved in, and we at that point we were renting this house, but I had to get in there and dig. I took out as much clay as I could in most of the planting beds, and then threw it away every week in the garbage. And I brought in a stuff that we can get down here called rose mix, and it has all kinds of dirt and perlite and organic matter, and then it also has some crushed up or shredded up pine bark and things like that in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I use as planting mix in the flower beds.
Mm-hmm.
The problem
Mm-hmm.
is as it breaks down, it sinks and it also
Mm-hmm.
washes out. So
Mm-hmm.
although it's done well, the problem is
Mm-hmm.
since I live in a world where there's a wind tunnel down my driveway, so all the weed
Mm-hmm.
seeds blow down my driveway and into my flower beds. So now we're going to
Mm-hmm.
go with landscaping fabric. Have you ever done that?
I have. We did that. We did that um, in the spring of 2020 before we moved to this house. It was heavy clay soil, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, we Googled, we had never done this before. So David and I Googled, and that's whatever we Googled said to do. Well, then my parents lived on 2 acres at the time. They still do. Now we live down the street from them on
Right.
2 acres in the same neighborhood. But so they had a guy who has helped them maintain their yard for years. And he came along. My mom was like, you need to call Ildeberto. So we called Ildeberto, and he's like, no, don't put landscaping fabric down. But I will tell you what he told us to do. And for those watching the recording, I would say, this is where you have to start relying on people in your area to get the best information. So go to a nursery, go to all the nurseries, talk to different people every time you go, and then just start recording the information. And I would actually say go to a nursery as opposed to going to Lowe's or Home Depot. I think you're going to get more expert, better local information. And then even if you're getting local information about how to amend soil, you're like, we live in the same city that we used to, and it was heavy clay over there, and the soil's been a lot better nurtured, but it didn't help prevent weeds. We ended up having to, we didn't even live in that house for another 6 months after we put it down. We sold the house, but we ended up ripping all of that weed blocking fabric out of the yard before we moved. But what Ildeberto told us to do was to amend the soil. He told us to use, and this again, for those watching the recording, the whole point of the gardening guidebook was to give you just enough frameworks that you could take this and go do your own research. But the adage on soil is it's better to plant a 50-cent plant in a $5 hole.
Right.
So I was spending, for years, this is before I got serious about this, but for years I would go buy a plant. Here's an example. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I like, oh, I'll just buy a hydrangea. This is why I can't do
sometimes those will regrow.
gardening.
It just depends. I've had luck with some until my dad decided that they were weeds and threw them away.
Yeah.
They hadn't started growing again. He said, well, you got them put down. I thought they were dead.
Right. And so sometimes I'll spend $30 on a hydrangea at the grocery store or something, and then I wonder why it doesn't grow. And I finally figured out that if I will work on the soil, first and foremost, if I will feed the soil, if I will make there are so many schools of thought on whether you should get a soil test or not. There's so many different things that you can do to the soil. And I have a list that's not even in the workbook. We can talk through in a second, but getting the soil right is going to be so important. So Ildeberto told us to add peat moss.
Okay.
We bought bags and bags and bags of peat moss, and I think it's called Humor, HUMOR.
Okay.
Ildeberto's
I think
Hispanic,
those are rice hulls, aren't they?
I don't know.
I think
I've also we also amended some beds with cotton burr compost, which stinks to high heavens. We couldn't go outside for a week to enjoy the yard while
I've never seen that down here. That must be something unique up there.
It definitely could be. geographical.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I've done, some people buy worm castings to put in their soil, but I actually bought, you do have worms?
Uh-huh.
The worms aerate the soil and help break the clay down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say if you've got like that heavy clay, it might just be that you need to go just a little bit deeper and then figure out how to amend it. It's usually a mixture of sand, clay. A sand really counteracts the clay. It's my understanding. I am not a soil expert, but it's my understanding that soil balances out the clay. And if you can get some of that stuff mixed and then add worms, I mean, you can order worms online and they come in a bag and you literally just pour them into it's disgusting. But good soil, and then just keeping things organic, keeping the chemicals out of the soil. One thing that I am really gearing up to tackle this year is on our roses last year, towards the end of the season, something was happening. The edge of the leaves turn yellow. It seems like there might be some, what do they call it? Brown spot, or sometimes they call it water spot, or
black spot.
Black spot, yeah.
And that's a mold. I had some little critters eating them, and I found out later after I got stung by one that we had that stupid caterpillar that's supposed to be so dangerous. I don't even remember what the heck it's called now. But they were eating some of my roses, and I had, kind of flipped one off, and he stung me in my finger. And
oh my goodness,
it had a nerve issue in it where it didn't feel good until the next day. It was kind of like dead. So everybody, if you see something crawling on your plants, you don't know what the heck it is, don't touch it. And this was one of those fuzzy caterpillar things. So if you have that problem in your area, don't touch them. Just cut them off and kill it somehow.
But I definitely, whenever it comes time to doing preventing weeds and pests, I feel like a mistake that I have made is going straight for the chemical stuff. And I feel like whenever I do that, I'm destroying the nutrients in the soil, instead of making the soil, instead of treating the soil like a living thing, I'm actually disrupting the molecular structure of it. And then the healthy pests, they're not pests, but they say that the 3 healthiest pests to have in your garden are honeybees, ladybugs, and oh my goodness, maybe it's worms. Do I have this in my notes? Did I write this down?
I remember that
earthworms,
eat aphids. And those are the ones that love roses. So when you see that, if you're lucky to get ladybugs. I don't know if stink bugs are beneficial or not.
I don't know. I know that bees are great for, the pollinators, like help strengthen the harvest and grow all that. But
now, if you have geckos, those are great for eating bugs. They'll eat bugs off of everything. And then you definitely don't want to spray your plants.
So, kind of back to the book. So we've talked a lot about soil, understanding your sun situation, for those starting out, just, I would say full sun. We have a lot of shade, and stuff grows better in the sun, and even the shade plants that I'm also learning that I need to bite off like one gardening educational experience at a time. So starting with sun plants and shade plants has not served me really well. This year, we're just going to focus on the sun plants, and I will work on the shady areas.
That's kind of what I'm going to do
another
too.
year. And then space, make sure. I made a mistake last year. I went to Lowe's, bought a bunch of tomatoes, planted them way too close together. And by the time I realized that I couldn't transplant them, and we just ended up with, there were like snakes in there and everything. It was all
So
kinds of
gross.
fun. I know. Nobody wanted to go pick tomatoes because they were, I mean, they were harmless snakes, but
I'm
still,
scared to
like,
death of snakes. It's one of the things
I know. We've got, they're out here on this creek, and I've just gotten a lot better about approaching the plants, rustling the plants. Then
Mm-hmm.
you look for the tomato. You back away from the plant. Okay. And then let me just keep running through the basics. We've made a list of things that you might need. And then in the workbook, there is a spot for you to create a plan. Something that I haven't focused on, I've been spending the past couple of years learning how to get things to grow. I really have not focused on the plantings, like what things are going to look like. And I do feel like that's kind of like a little song and dance, because I planted roses last year and then we've moved them already. So I think you have to kind of figure out what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how long it's going to take you. And so instead of just putting the garden plan in the workbook, oh, it says my screen sharing is paused. Let me resume share. Let me fix this. Here we go. Let's share this. I put a section for gardening goals in there. And this is what I haven't used this yet this spring, but what I'd like to do is sit down and say, okay, what do I want my springtime yard to look like? What do I want my summer yard to look like? I need to go outside and take some pictures. I probably just need to draw on the pictures. Just, I've seen people use Photoshop type apps where they plug plants in to figure out what they want things to look like, or you can use a Pinterest board. But I'm not going to be able to get my yard. That's a realistic expectations is helpful in gardening too. I'm not going to be able to get my yard where I want it to go in one season. Now, maybe if I hired a landscape architect and we had a landscape architect quote a plan whenever we came out here. It was between $1,500 and $3,000 for the plan. And that's not the plants and the dirt and the labor to make it happen.
Right.
So that's just not in the budget right now. And so sitting down and saying, okay, what do I want my gardening goals for this year to be? I think that can really help goals help guide us. And anytime we end up too far in one direction or the other, they give us something to come back to focus on. And then I included in the workbook these examples of seasonal tasks, because whenever I was getting started, I just wanted some place where I could go. Let's say it's early spring. I want to plant vegetables and fruits, or I want flowers in a certain bed. I've identified what I want in my goals, my garden goals. And so this kind of, I always say, start where you are, and being able to look at example seasonal tasks will give you an idea of just where you want to jump in and start with your goals. So there's 4 pages of that, just examples, and then blank pages for those who want to do it on their own. And then once you have the basics identified, and we did kind of fly through that just because Sonia and I were talking, which is fine. I think another big thing that helped me succeed and just really embrace the learning process that gardening was getting to know my plants. And it's just kind of a funny thing to think about. But when I started looking at my plants as almost, how do I invest in a relationship with my kids? I have a dog. I love the dog. I invest in the dog helps me. We have a very codependent relationship. I invest in the dog and the dog invests in me. And if I want my plants to grow and thrive with the same, experience the same life, and I get to experience the benefit of the plants as I do with my kids and my dog, which is just a funny example, but whatever. I need to get to know them. I need to know what makes my plants tick. And so here we have this plant profile worksheet, which I came up with. And I'll tell you how I came up with it. Is the first year I was doing this. And actually that first year, in 2020, we actually did 2 gardens because we started the one at the house where we were at, and then we moved midsummer and started this one here as well. And so even though this is my 3rd year of gardening, it sort of feels like my 4th attempt at making all this work. I bought a bunch of plants. I got on bloomingbulb.com. No, it wasn't that. Some website, and I spent a lot of money on plants, and they showed up, and I just realized I can't stick all those plants in a hole in the ground and expect them to all grow the same way. They have different needs. They have different fertilizing needs. They have different. And then as I tried to get to know each plant, at first I thought, well, I'll just Google it. You end up on somebody's blog reading an article about how to grow a peony. And then you would end up on somebody else's blog, and the information is conflicting. And that it's understandable. No one's trying to lie to us, but we all live in different zones, and we all have different yards, and our soil all has different needs, and there's different watering conditions and all kinds of stuff. And so I thought, I need a place where I can take all this information about how to grow peonies and put it on one piece of paper. And so each of these plant profile sheets, and I can show you mine, it's designed to help you kind of.
Did you go to marthastewart.com for peonies?
No, I don't know. I just was kind of using peony as a random example.
She's got great resources on that since she grows so many of them.
Oh, really?
That's another thing I'd like to grow, but I don't know if it's going to make it down here. It might be too hot.
I would think. I don't know.
Maybe in a shade.
Maybe I'm wrong. So I bought all these plants. I can't even remember the website. And honestly, I think that, and we did transplant some to the new house. It definitely, I would say there's probably only one still alive. But so my plant profile sheet that I have on my plants looks a little bit different. We've updated how the new one looks in the gardening guidebook. But you can even tell that I filled things out at different times because the handwriting's different, the ink color changes. I'm just making little notes. So this is a lilac tree. Wrote the zone, wrote the sun. Most things are going to be full sun or do better if they're full sun. I wrote the height, the width, the spacing, the growth rate, planting and potting, protect from wind, compost and mulch each spring. And so this is designed to help people fill out one for each plant and then figure out what works in terms of individual plants. Okay. So then let me go back to, okay. So I'm going to keep walking through the workbook. We've got to-do list by month. So here's an example. And this worksheet is designed to really just be a one-page perspective on, and it's going to depend on everybody's area, but what do I need to do in January and February? What do I need to do in March? And the reason we combined January and February is because there's just not a lot to do, and you're typically shopping for seeds and tools and things like that. But then you get into these other months, and sometimes there's a lot more to do. November and December down here probably could have been combined as well to leave room for more of a notes section. But I've even gotten into doing the bulb planting thing in November and December, like amaryllis and paper whites. And the first year I did that, I had great luck with that and felt very confident. And then last year, and even this spring, last December, I tried to reuse some of my bulbs, and I ordered new bulbs and nothing bloomed. Like I have no idea.
It might not have gotten cold enough, I wonder. I don't
I was
know.
doing it all indoors.
Now I
And
had
so,
I used to force amaryllis at Christmas.
mhm,
And
I
we
love it.
also, when I managed an office, we also did amaryllis. We do that because we were so sick of poinsettias. And then,
Mhm.
everybody took an amaryllis home and then have
Mm.
like 2 or 3 of them. I would plant them outdoors and they would come back for like 3 years and then they were done.
In
It just
Houston?
depends how much energy is in those bulbs.
Right. And they say leave the stems on it like
Mm-hmm.
for as long as possible to,
Mm-hmm.
um, so is that you planted the amaryllis outside in
Yep.
Houston?
Yep.
And what year do they bloom when you plant them outside? Or what season do they bloom in when you plant them outside?
About the same time. Sometimes they came up a
Okay.
little bit earlier, sometimes like early December. But it was
Oh,
such a
interesting.
crapshoot. It was an experiment, and I was surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't mean that every amaryllis bulb you
Mm-hmm.
bought and had indoors for the holidays would do the same, because they do.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are just made for 1 year, and
Mm-hmm.
those are not cheap to buy if you're just buying individual new ones to put them in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I would not
Well,
buy more than like 3 to test and
mm-hmm.
see if you're successful.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting, so I have all the bulbs left
Mm-hmm.
over, and I wonder, it would almost be interesting to take all the bulbs, all of them, the paper whites, the amaryllis, the hyacinths, everything that I've attempted to force inside. And I've left the green on them
Mm-hmm.
so that they're, eating the chlorophyll, but just pick a bed, stick them outside and see what happens. And I feel like that's gardening in
And
a
if they don't
nutshell.
bloom, then they're done.
Mm-hmm. But they're in the ground composting.
Right,
I don't just
exactly.
don't
Or
have
the
to worry
squirrels get them.
Right. Okay, so we've got this to-do list by month for people to fill out. And then there are 12 monthly worksheets where these are non-dated so that you can add the dates in and reuse this guidebook next year if you want to. And then there's little to-do lists at the bottom of each of those calendar pages. We'll flip through those really quick and we'll head back to this. And I have to move my little bar around so I can see. So this is a seasonal tending worksheet that I came up. It's worth noting that the gardening seasons are kind of like, it's not the regular quarters. It's kind of like winter is December, January, February.
Right.
Spring is March, April, May. So, I wish that was, I wish God like synced up with the, don't we use the Gregorian calendar? Anyway, but that's okay. God didn't want to do that. So the whole point of, or the whole idea behind this worksheet is to put the name of your plant. And then we've shown like X's right here as an example, but you can also, in a perfect world, we would have some little stickers that you could put on here and you could say, okay, in January, I need to fertilize. In February, I need to prune. But this can help if you put all your plants on this sheet. You can do kind of a big overview of what needs to happen when for most of your plants. So I have my David Austin Roses catalog
I have
for
one too.
this year. I mean, they do such a good job, don't they? The graphics on all of these are great, but usually they include, I don't know if it's in this one. Normally they include a little planting calendar where they tell you, and I was going to pull it up because what you do to roses is different than what you do to veggies. I don't think they have it in here. This is just the catalog. When you order David Austin Roses, you get a cute little
This is another really
planting.
good catalog,
Mm-hmm.
White Flower Farm. Even if you don't
Uh-huh.
buy your plants from them, and they have a lot of good information. It's like really, really good. And they have roses
Yeah.
and also kinds of vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
and it's free at White
Yes, I think
Flower Farm. You can go online and order that.
yes, I have my White Flower Farm. I do save all my catalogs because you're right, Sonia, there is a lot of information in it. And sometimes they'll have the same plants and then different prices and then different information. And it just, that again, that's why I made the plant profile sheets, was as I was coming across that almost conflicting information, and no one's trying to intentionally deceive me. I realize that, but it would just gave me a spot to put all of it so I could synthesize the information and really understand.
The other thing you can do with these catalogs is you can get with them with the scissors, because they'll send you more than one over the next few months, and you can cut whatever you like out, roses or whatever, and then put them on your planting plan or move things around.
That
if you want
is
something a
actually
little bit
a
more
very good
visual
idea.
for color.
You could actually like cut the plants out, cut the pictures out, and then just use them on your photos or whatever to figure out.
Right.
It's a good idea. That's the old-fashioned way. So the last section, and the gardening guidebook is really divided into 5 sections. For our binders, we have five tabs. And so I'm going to go back here to the beginning. There are the basics, which we've kind of talked through. Go back. The plan, your plant profiles, your calendars, and then you'll just end up in your gardening guidebook, you will just end up with a lot of cheat sheets. We call them cheat sheets because that's what I use to just any type of information I find online. I'm putting it in the cheat sheet section so that I can synthesize that information. So my cheat sheet section is, I'll show you what I've got in here. I found this companion planting chart online at some point, printed that out. It has a lot of information on it. I have found a chart for when to plant bulbs. Here is, I did some research on the Gianettis. Do you follow Velvet and Linen? They live out in California. She's written a couple books, and her landscape plan is in one of the books. So a lot of her plants will not grow in my zone. She's in California, very different conditions than what we experience here in Oklahoma, but I still wanted to understand. And then I have, like, I've done what you just said. I sort of cut apart my catalogs. I circled the things that I am looking at. Oh, here's a David Austin. Oh, this is the place where I ordered the worms. Nature's Good Guys. During the pandemic, during lockdown, I bought this EnviroCycle thing, which is a very handy composter. If you want to order worms, Nature's Good Guys, we've already talked about that. Oh, I was going to show you the planting guide. So this came with the roses, and they just have like basic guidance for watering roses right here. And it says, let's do an example. For during May through October, I need to water for established roses, I need to water once every 2 weeks. So I could go back to this worksheet right here, and I could put roses. And then I would come over here, and in May, I might just do like a little water, I might do like draw a little droplet and then just put a 2x beside it. And these little guidelines that David Austin sends you whenever you order your roses, I needed a place where I could transfer all of this information from this book to, because I was trying to do roses and bulbs and veggies and
Yeah.
pansies and everything all at once. And it was so much. I just like to condense information. Okay, seed buying planner. This is like if you're shopping for seeds, it can help to have something to compare. So we put that little worksheet in here for you. Seed inventory. I should have gotten it, but I have, you know, those plastic like receipt envelopes, or it's almost like a coupon envelope, or you know, 12 months.
Right.
I got one of those, and I put all the seeds in there by when you're supposed to
That's a good idea.
start them. Thank you.
You can
It was
also
one of those
use
moments.
an extra recipe box if you have it for storage. If you don't have
That's a good
that.
idea. That's a really good idea too. You could do like 12 little tabs.
Yeah.
Organize all my seeds by need to plant them.
Mhm.
You and I like to just plant seeds outside in the ground for all the reasons we have already talked about. But you could also use page protectors and this seed inventory worksheet to do something very similar. If you were building a binder, or you know, you could take your picture. Let's pretend this is a seed packet. So you take your little seed packet, you're gonna glue it onto your seed inventory worksheet, and then because you only have one side of the seed packet right there, you're going to need to write all of the instructions down to the left of your seed packet. But I've even noticed that a lot of times, even though I'm following the instructions on the back of the seed packet to plant my plants, some of that information is incomplete. Like it'll tell me when to start the seeds indoors, but it won't tell me if I can plant them outside. Or it'll tell me when it germinates, but it won't tell me how much space I need to place between each seed. So again, I just wanted a place where I could take the information I was getting about the seeds and the plants I was purchasing and be able to collect it all in one spot. So I can just look at that and say, okay, I'm going to try to grow cilantro from seed this year. Here's everything I need to know about how to do that on one page. So that's the purpose of the seed inventory worksheet.
Did you ever go to one of the companies that the seeds were produced by onto their website to see if they had more documentation on each seed?
I have never ordered seeds from a website. I would like to do that, but
like if they've got like a brand,
Yeah.
you should be able to go to their website and maybe they've got more detail on that, on when it's time to thin them out and when you think in your area you should plant them.
I feel like there are some really good heirloom seed co's,
Oh yeah.
like organic, and just you can get really cool species and stuff. I feel like I'm always like walking through Walmart and I'm like, oh, let's try carrots this year, kids. And we just
Carrots are supposed to be pretty easy.
but me and seeds, seeds and I have not figured out we have not figured out how to get along. Like,
did you successfully grow sunflowers last year?
No, I did grow gigantic sunflowers from seed when we were living out in Carlson Landing at the lake, like the really giant
the huge ones.
It was kind of fun. I mean, we had and this is when I was just throwing seeds in the ground to see what would happen. If I didn't have a landscape plan or anything, but we planted them on the back side of the house, and I have a picture, and they grew like almost as tall as the house. I mean, they were huge, but they looked really cool.
Kansas, when you drive through Kansas, they're really, really tall.
Really? Yeah. No, it was, I was like, why do people not plant these more often? I also wondered if I always kind of wonder, that's probably did God make sunflowers that big, or is that a genetically modified sunflower?
I think a lot of them are
know.
genetically modified. I don't think they were ever really that tall.
Or that big around. And then I think, well, if I'm planting a genetically modified thing in an organic, that's why I haven't planted any of those again since that year. I just don't know enough about what it's going to do to the rest of my garden, and And last year, at least, I was trying to approach things organically. Especially because we're trying to grow food,
Yes.
just healthy, cucumbers or whatever.
I want to be spending a fortune at home at Whole Foods buying organic.
Yeah.
Although now
And
we
so-
can get it a little cheaper at some of the other grocery stores, but supply and demand, it's still expensive.
Doesn't seem to be going in any direction in our favor. Okay, let me run through the rest of these little cheat sheets. We can stop and talk about any of them. We have a seed starting log here. Again, we made this printable for people. I have not successfully started seeds. I'm not the poster child for that. Then there's just a blank weekly garden journal. I do think a weekly record of gardening activities is helpful, but I plan on just using, I have an extra 2022 weekly planner, and I plan on using that this year. These are worksheets for the tracking harvest, the perennial, like a fruit, vegetable, and herb worksheet, perennials, trees, and shrubs. I like to track those separately too, just because sometimes when you're planning those, they're more of an investment than a tree is 200, hundreds of dollars, right? Depending on the size of the tree. And so I like to just keep a record of when we moved in, we had to cut down 5 really huge trees, and we replaced them immediately. But I like to keep a record of the type of tree that we bought, when we bought it, and any notes made when planting or if we moved it. Annuals. Annual flowers are flowers that you have to plant every year. And I do think it's helpful to keep a record of those. So like if you plant pansies in the fall, or a cabbage is also great, like the pretty purple cabbages. I love those.
The kale. Yeah, those are pretty.
Yes, the kale's pretty. We had some kale that had been out there for a couple of years, and it died in that last frost. It made it through some serious, I don't know what, sometimes it just gets it. But we did manage to keep those for 2 seasons. So just tracking annuals is helpful. Fertilizers is another information point where I started to get completely overwhelmed. The NPK thing, stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and let me Google that. What does NPK stand for? NPK nutrients.
Isn't K iron?
Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Oh, potassium.
But there's no K in that word.
I think it's no K. A chemical symbol.
Maybe. Oh yeah, probably from the periodic table of elements. Not a scientist, not pretending to be, but again, when I got the little planting booklet from David Austin, they tell me, they were like, you need to use this kind of fertilizer for your roses. And then there was a different kind of fertilizer to use for the vegetables. And so one of my goals for this year is we have ended up with a garage full of fertilizers. I want to go out there, take an inventory of what I have using this printable, and then I can figure out a better fertilizing schedule. I just think that there are so many.
Well, and you may want to also look at different areas, try a different fertilizer and just see which one performs better.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then, use up what you have and then don't buy that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Then there's just a spot for making note of favorite resources. So this is a place where I would, I've just stuck some of these informational pieces that have come with stuff that I've ordered in the back of my binder. But if I wanted to go through and clean it out, I could list that I got worms here. And that's everything. That the whole point of the gardening guidebook is to give people an area where they can collect and synthesize all the information that they're getting, so that we can all be more successful in our gardening, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
anyway, what
really
are
good.
your next steps, Sonia? What are you gonna do?
Well, I'm hoping my yard guy shows up on Friday, and he and his guys are usually my little worker bees to take care of the ugly stuff and the heavy work stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
talk with him and see what he thinks we should do with the front beds, with the roses, and in the back. I've also got some Mexican ruella, but it's long and it's taken over flower beds that I don't want it in.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to dig that out. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the first stuff. Our pine tree is actually pollinating right now, so I'm kind of hiding from that pollen until it completely
Mm-hmm.
blows out with all this crazy wind. And now that the rain, it might
Mm-hmm.
have helped a lot today. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of get everything started trimmed up, and then I'm going to order a few
Mm-hmm.
roses just to fill in some holes here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and put in new bedding plants in the front. So I
Yes,
lost the
that's
last of
fun.
the stuff that I really wanted to keep. It's dead now
Mm-hmm.
from the freeze. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna start new.
It's always so, there is something about gardening, I think, that's good for the soul, about just, I don't know, there's something about hands in dirt that just, it just works. And then for anybody who's watching this, who's looking for you want an easy way to start, I would actually say that roses have been the easiest thing I've
They
attempted.
are.
Shockingly, they're not inexpensive. I mean, I think you can get bare root roses for like 25, or you used to be able to.
But if you're really not sure what you're doing, but you'd like to start, go to a real nice nursery and compare prices. Sometimes the roses that are at a country area is a better price and just as good a quality.
Okay.
Weeks,
Interesting.
WEEKS roses is a very good brand if you can get those in your area. I've had very good luck with some of the online rose companies as well, not just David Austin, but there's other ones out there. Some of the heirloom roses are very expensive, and I wouldn't start buying a $60 plant if you've never done it before. Try something like $25, $30.
Because they're still
be able to
pretty.
get them for like 18, but that's long gone.
There is a website called, I think it's called Heirloom Roses.
Yeah.
And they don't have only heirloom roses. They have all different kinds.
Right.
So I would also say don't be afraid of that. It's just, but yeah, you don't need a $60 plant to get started. I ordered, they have a rose called, I think it's called Earth Angel. And it's the rose that looks the closest to Juliet roses. Juliet roses are those really big, pale, pinky, peachy that everybody puts in wedding bouquets. But it's a David Austin hybrid, but it's not available. You cannot grow Juliet. You can't buy a Juliet rose plant. You have to be an authorized breeder of those roses. So I guess David Austin has a branch of like, it's almost like commercial roses so I wanted something that looked like that, and the Earth Angel rose is closest. And for some reason, I could only find it last year at the heirloomroses.com. So that's my next step is the roses all the leaves have come out in the past week. I've gone out and deadheaded all the little remaining blooms that I can't believe I didn't catch over the winter.
Mine are actually budding out, and I'm going to let them bloom, and then I'm going to cut them back because I've got a couple that are really tall. They're actually touching the top of the fascia board. So they're way too tall right here by my window. And then I've got another thing that's an easy thing to grow is a climbing rose. If you got a place where you can put it up against a fence or something so it has support, climbing roses are fun and they're very little work. And if you guys get a good freeze in the winter, boy, the next spring they are just magnificent because they love
a good
cold
freeze.
weather.
Okay.
It gets it really energized.
Interesting.
So
I
this
didn't know
year, since we've had so many freezes, I think our roses are going to be really good. The ones that
that. That's
survive,
exciting.
I hope.
See, and that's an example of a piece of information. I've never heard that before.
Especially if you live down
I
south.
But I just think it would be so interesting for those who are watching the recording on this to be able to say, okay, here's all the information I picked up from listening to these two gals talk about their gardens. You know, take that, plug that into, you know, a journal, like your system, your gardening's like I just happen to be a fan of paper systems, and you could, so I'm gonna have to research that. But I think we're gonna plant our next steps. We are gonna do raised beds for some edible gardening. But I just am telling myself this year, I wanted to get those roses moved because I think they'll thrive better in a different spot. But we're not gonna, aside from buying the usual garden veggies at Lowe's or Home Depot, I don't think I'm gonna try to do any new major landscaping.
I'm not either. I've got some bushes on the other side of the front of the house that made it through the heavy freeze from last year, and where we had our sub-zero temperatures that Houston doesn't have, and we didn't have any power.
Texas
those survived,
shut down.
and I have boxwoods that made it through too. And I think I'm the only one in the neighborhood that actually had boxwoods that survived, just because of how they were set up against the house. They were enough protection. So we're going to let those go another year, and then I'm going to take the old stuff out next spring and put in some new planting. But I kind of want to wait and see if we want to paint first, because I don't want anybody busting it up with ladders and everything else.
Yeah,
that would be like
true
after
too.
that's done.
Yeah.
So
cool.
And I'll just work my way around the house, because this house is 40 years old. And some of these plantings are original builder plantings, and they're just done.
Yeah, but I think it's little by little. I think the only thing I didn't say, I took a bunch of notes right before to, you know, just I have not thought about gardening stuff this year. So we had worked on the guidebook as a team, and then I haven't been to the nursery. I haven't been anywhere to figure out where I'm going to start. But another thing I'm going to focus on this year is weed prevention.
Yes, me too.
Last year, our weeds got out of control, and I'm lucky I had Ildeberto and his crew. They were able to come in and really like get them out when they started getting out of control. But I really want to focus on improving the soil, and then making sure I'm keeping things watered, and then preventing the weeds, which I think I'm going to start with mulch. On that, I might mulch a couple times this year instead of buy new plants. Like, I'll just spend my money on.
I have an Instagram friend that decided to try some rubber mulch.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're my test rabbit. We're gonna see how that fares. She lives in Birmingham. I said, what would be nice is be able to do that. I mean, it looks real. Put like the regular mulch underneath it, and then put that on top to kind of hold everything down so the rain doesn't wash it out. So I'm going to see how that goes for her this year, and if it works, I might do a little in certain spots.
So does it disintegrate like rubber mulch?
No, it's just kind of like a top layer. It's the same kind of stuff that they put in kids' playgrounds.
Yeah,
but it's a little bit smaller size. Yeah, and I haven't found it locally, but I haven't looked very hard yet, because I don't even know what the cost of it is. But
so if you did that though,
might be interesting in certain places where you have a problem with drainage.
Yeah, but okay, so but are you basically putting plastic into your garden?
Well, it's kind of like just an overlay to hold stuff in. And I'm wondering if it's going to prevent weeds as well, because it's going to kind of be a little bit denser than the mulch. So I don't know.
But if you were gonna
I wouldn't put it in with like food plants or anything like that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, okay, so then you need to take the plant out and put another plant back in? Are you going to constantly have
You have to
rubber in
pull
your
that
flower bed?
back, put the plant in and then push it back in. That's why I'm just letting her test that this year to see if it's worth
That's interesting. Yeah.
That'll be something to look at next year, maybe.
Yeah. And that's what gardening is. It's just learning from people as you go.
And that's a good place to check. If people go out on Instagram and find somebody that's really into gardening or whatever, this lady uses a lot of plants from Southern Living because she's in Birmingham. And that's where they're
Do you mind sharing who it is? Is she a public profile?
Yeah. Let's see. Let me look it up real quick. She's actually in Round Top this weekend, and I'm very jealous.
That's fun. You're not far from Round Top.
I know, but I chose not to go until this fall because I've got too much stuff going on the inside of the house right now. It's called Deeply Southern Home.
Okay.
All one word. Deeply Southern Home.
Okay. I'll have to go look at her plants.
Leslie. She's also an interior designer, and she's fun to follow.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to sign off. Sonia, thank you so much for joining us today and for your input. Great. And yeah, it was so fun. And then for everybody watching the recording, y'all just let us know. Send me pictures on Instagram or tag me or whatever in your garden, and we can grow things together. It'll be fun.
Okay.
Okay.
See ya.
See everybody. Bye.
Bye.